Okay. Oh, yes. Well, you have.
We can.
Okay, we'll make it Swedish.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, we're exchange students here covering.
So I'm from Hong Kong. Yes. Where are you from? And we'll be staying here for 1 week. We are reporting on this concert.
Yeah,
you can just look at it. You can ignore the camera. Yeah, so thanks very much for joining us. And at the beginning of this session, you mentioned about like what do you think about the current system?
Well, I think they're incomplete, unreliable. They tend to focus on adolescents and adults, so we don't know enough about children. But I think what we do know is something needs to be done.
Yes, and just now you mentioned about like the policy changes. Is that like a policy changes right now? I'm quite interested in not really the core of the reality. So what do you think should be done
simply focus on the first 10 years of life. Children, predominantly girls, should be given the majority of funding. The policies on people of my age come directly to the children because affecting the generating children is more likely to bring about long-term benefit than giving any funding to the boy who is
in your opinion, why are the reasons decide in the previous years we're only getting the services and not really the corporation?
The first problem was that we didn't take it seriously. Bearing in mind it took 50 years to get smoking recognised as a health concern, so it took a long time. The second problem is, without being philosophical about it, you have a cultural problem in the body. We tend to think of things too much in terms of intellectual aspects, things like that. And the body is much more just basically a piece of the world. And the more we're learning about neuroscience, intelligence, we realise that the body is absolutely fundamental organ function. And if it doesn't work properly, then it doesn't operate properly. And I think that's part, there's been a slight cultural change there. Saying children in this generation will be the first in recorded history to have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. It's quite alarming. That makes sense to politicians.
Is it true that this is a European issue, or is it like a universal issue? If it's a universal issue, then what's the difference between Europe and other countries?
It's a worldwide concern, although it's different in different countries. So, Europe is the easiest distinctions between developed and developing. So, the developed world and Europe and so on has had a longer problem. The developing world is extremely the last year's growth non-communicable diseases, which is one of the consequences of activity, is China. And that's certainly to do with the rapid industrialisation that's been taking place in China. The likelihood is if that's true, then India will be hit next. Brazil has a serious problem with non-communicable diseases. Incredibly fast industrialisation. So industrial revolution began in India 150 years ago. It's hitting China now, and I find you can see a wave of activity following it. Cars are becoming normal in China, whereas a generation ago they weren't. They were cycling. Whereas in America, people were driving crazy. So I think the problem is the UK, Europe, America, and so on, has a long-standing problem with physical activity. China, India, Brazil, countries like that, Southeast Asia is really quite concerned, have within one generation gone from almost complete activity to almost complete inactivity.
So in your opinion, who do you think is best whose job is it to promote or actively children to want
I think it's everyone who has to have a responsibility. And one of the shames about the modern world, particularly in the industrialised West, is it's become more individualised, so people don't feel a responsibility. I was a child, I could play in the streets, knowing that not only my family would look after me, but the whole community. I think it would be lovely if that sense of community is different. I think parents and teachers need to work together, they need to collaborate, because this is a shared problem. The reality is that children at school are one particular context of physical activities, but the majority of their time is at home. So it's got to be both. And then at weekends it could be family and friends and so on. And also I think it's for the rest of us to make the environment safe and welcoming. For example, research shows if there's an environment where children are playing and young people are hanging around, older people are more likely to be active because it's a safer environment. An environment where children don't feel safe is probably also unsafe for them. So it's in my interest to make these environments much more placeable. And then I talk a lot about women's physical activities. The fact that there are cities around this world where women are scared to is a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. And it could be easily solved through street lighting and urban design. So that becomes a national thing to address.
All right, that's all we have time for with being Tuesday now. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
British. I didn't get to
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So is it bacon or pastries?
No, it's so sure.
Thank you very much.
It's more information.
Okay, welcome to the next session here, which is the first of 4 sessions that we have called the Idan Development Forum. Idan is the Danish abbreviation for the Danish Institute for Sports Studies. And the Development Forum, the reason why we call it is that earlier this year we launched something we called the Development Forum for Sport, Idan Forum we call it in Denmark. Is a network of where people could join in various stakeholders from sport, from organized sport, from leisure departments, from social enterprises, and because we felt that sport was developing in a way that we could not just address it through the normal path, which is the governing bodies and which is the what can you say, the sports and the municipalities, leisure departments. We needed to have them talk together and exchange information based on analysis. And we have about 50 or 60 people in this network. They are also here, some of them. I think we are about 15 from the network here. And we are happy to see that we have a good attendance here. So the sessions are a little bit interlinked. In this session we will look at some facts and some analysis, and in the next session in the afternoon we will have some of the sports organizations, but also commercial enterprises respond to how they can use it to work in new ways. And tomorrow we will look at some of the new trends, the outdoor trends. You can say that sports facilities, what is really growing is maybe not really actually sport in a traditional sports setting. And I'll tell you this now because that session from 1 o'clock, when we have a session with some facts in here, and then we go to see a brand new part of this city. They moved the container port. You can see it from your hotel window where the new place is, but the old part is being developed, which is close to the city center, to a new part of city. And they really try to think, how can we make this place live while we build, and also afterwards to make it an engaging place also for community, and they have many thoughts about that. So if you are into that kind of urban development or new trends, you should join us on that bus trip tomorrow, and there will be sandwiches in the bus, and we will end up in one of the newest building in Aarhus called the Dokken, which is on the harbor front. To make this new area live, they created this building, which is, in a way, is just a library and citizen service, but it has become a place where people just go, and it had, in the first 4 months, it had more than 500,000 people going in there, and they are just crazy about it. And because I was organizing this conference, I'm probably the only one left in Aarhus who hasn't been in that building. So I look forward to it. But that's another story. That was some advertisement. What? That is tomorrow. Yes, that's tomorrow. I said, I'm sorry. So today we will start with the development forum. And what is also the purpose of this session is, if you were here yesterday, you saw maybe the FIFA session in the theater. And for Play the Game, it is quite surreal in a way that two candidates for FIFA presidency, they want to be seen with us. They want to use sort of Play the Game to say we stand for something new, because normally we're used to them not really wanting to talk to us, and so that means that you can actually achieve something by putting things on the agenda. And you also know we did this with this report, as trying to, of course, a lot of other people do good things, but can we actually do the research and can we put it on the agenda? Then maybe we can make some change, and that's what we are all about in the way we work. The problem is with this topic, which is maybe the most important in sport. Yesterday in Denmark, I'm not a Twitter expert, but the Play the Game hashtag was actually #1 in Denmark. It was the most tweeted during the FIFA sessions. But it won't be in a session like this. And that is the challenge we have. How can we also put this on the agenda? Have we got any journalists in the room? Not a lot. They just don't get it, that this is a big story. And that is one of the challenges we have. So if you saw the previous session, the ISKA, they have made this movement campaign. This is movement pills where they prescribe physical activity. And they really try to put it on the agenda. How much it costs physical activity and how much could be done. It's just so difficult. So that is, we really want to do that. So that was a long introduction, and I hope you can help us with it, of course. So we will now start with the first speaker, and that is, as you see, this the title of this session is "The Power of Data Analysis and Analysis for Sport for All Strategies." And one of the leading experts is this person. You can see him there, Koen Breedveld. He's the head of the Mulier Institute in Holland. They do a lot of research, and they also put it on the agenda, and they also create some policy change. So I will leave it to you, Koen, to paint this picture.
Thank you very much, Henrik, for allowing me time to speak on this subject. And congratulations on becoming trending topic on Twitter. It seems to be the most important thing you can realize now as a project, becoming trending topic. That tells you a little bit more, that tells you a little bit of how data are changing and how I think the whole society is changing. Let me just briefly introduce my institute, okay? We are a small research institute in the Netherlands. We've got about 20 people. We are independent, non-profit research organization, started in 2002. The guy on top there is the guy that we named the institute after, is Mr. Mulier. Mr. Mulier was the son of a mayor, and he was actually the founding father of the famous 11 city trips in the Netherlands. He was the founding father of the Football Association in the Netherlands, the Skating Association in the Netherlands, and the International Skating Union that operates globally. So he operated at, let's say, the late 19th century, and maybe it's not unfair to say that if you're not talking about corruption, it's mainly due to him. Because that is not the reason why we named the institute after him. He also wrote a lot of books about sports. He was one of the first that wrote books on how you should do track and field, how you should do football, and because he wrote so many books about sport, we decided to name the institute after him. And of course nowadays we do not write about football as much as we did, but we write about, like, let's say, running across Europe, big project, or how sports clubs in Europe are trying to keep a position which is increasingly difficult. Basically, this is a session about the power of data. Okay? So I want to talk to you a little bit about the challenges that we face in sport policies. But before talking about the challenges that we face in sport policies, I want to talk a little bit about the strength of data and how you can use research. Generally, I think there are 4 ways that policymakers could use research. At the start, it helped to the researchers to show the developments that are going on in society, to maybe warn that things are going wrong, to maybe raise questions and raise debate, so that there's a sense of urgency that something needs to be done. Like, for instance, ISCA is doing, when ISCA is saying that not being physically active kills about 500,000 people in Europe, and that not being physically active costs European citizens about 80 billion euros per year. That is like the function of research for ISCA and for that theme. The second thing that research can do then is that if you want to develop a policy, you need to know what factors are important to influence. You need to know that if you want to stimulate physical activity, you need to have your activities being pointed at the age group between 0 and 10 years old, because that is the influential age group. If you can make a difference in that age group, they will continue being physically active during their lifetime, so you should aim your policies at that age group. The third one is that, of course, you need to monitor the programs. Are the programs successful? And if they're not successful, why are they not successful? And the last question, of course, is that it's up to research to come up with new concepts, new theories, new scenarios. Now, we do a lot of monitoring, okay? And I always get the question, why should we monitor? Is it really important to monitor? And if you do monitor, can the monitors be in any way effective? And I want to show you just 3 examples of very simple kind of monitoring that was successful. And we were quite easily able to show how a program was successful. This was a program on stimulating swimming among ethnic minorities. And we had cities that had a program and cities that didn't have a program. And we could very easily show that the cities that had a program were more successful in stimulating swimming in ethnic minorities than the cities that didn't have a program. And since the program was oriented towards ethnic minorities, we looked especially at ethnic minorities. And we could see that in the cities that had the programs, the swimming capabilities, skills of ethnic minorities grew, while in the cities that didn't have a program, it declined. So there's a very easy way of showing that that program had been effective in some sense. Just to cite another example, this was a program to stimulate sport participation among ethnic minorities. It was called MEDU. MEDU is participation, and it involved 9 federations and 500 sport clubs. And we could show that the increase in sport participation among ethnic minorities in the clubs that joined the program was much bigger than the general increase in sport participation in those 9 federations. So we could show that the clubs that were into the program were indeed effectively operating and stimulating sport participation among those ethnic minorities. Finally, the third program, and that is going to be out on the 4th of November, so there are no journalists in the room. Frans van Oosterwijk, you should keep your mouth shut, please. Okay? Because this is coming out only on the 4th of November, and it's a program to stimulate sportsmanship and respect in the Netherlands, which is called Healthy Sport Climate, Veilig Sportklimaat in Dutch. And when we monitored that program, we could show that the federations that were into that program had more progress, were more successful in that program than the federations that were not in that program. So these are just 3 very simple kind of examples to show you how you can effectively monitor a program and show its success. It's not very difficult. It's not very difficult to do actually. The one thing that you need to do if you want to have some kind of effective monitoring, if you get a lot of questions on policymakers, policy programs, and asking, can you show that our program was successful? And generally what happens is that the program has been running for 3 years. And then in the end of the 3 years you say, can you now please start monitoring the program and tell us that it was successful, or that it was not successful? And you can't do that. But it's so easy to do that if, alongside the policy program, the researchers are being given a chance to work with the policymakers and to develop a monitoring program right from the start on. And if you then cooperate between the researchers and the policymakers, and you respect the fact that researchers hold a different position and need to answer to different questions than the policymakers. And that respect should come from both sides. Researchers should know that policymakers need to answer to different questions than the researchers. Okay? They need to explain to different people what they've been doing than they did themselves. If you have such kind of mutual respect between the researchers and the policymakers, if you work together, and if you involve the researchers head-on from the start of the program, you can build effective sport monitors. They can show you the value and the gain that you booked through the programs. So generally, I do think there's a good sense to involve research in policy programs, and you can gain by involving researchers into your programs. Now, what would be, for my sake, the main challenges that we face when we look at sports? I will draw pretty much from the situation in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we're doing pretty well. I think there's no country in Europe where people are so satisfied with their facilities, where club membership is that high. We're doing well on volunteering, we're doing well on sport participation, and we're doing pretty well when it comes to being physically active. I used to say that we're doing pretty well at elite sports as well, but since we didn't make it for a European Championship in football, unlike Albania, I stopped showing that slide. No offense meant to Albania, sorry. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. But okay, at least we're doing pretty well in grassroots sports. Okay, you can see that grassroots sport has been declining for let's say the 1960s quite steeply. Don't get mistaken, it isn't the case that it is still increasing over the last couple of years. 2013 and 14 showed a decrease in sport participation, so we are facing challenges in that area. And the other challenge is that if you look at club sports, it's not increasing to the same degree as is sport participation in general. So there's an increasing gap between people doing sports and people being member of a sports club. Generally we're doing well, but we do face some challenges. I'm going to skip that. So basically I think in the Netherlands now, even though we're doing well, we do face some serious trouble. We do have some serious challenges. And this is the first one, okay? Because, and I would assume that this is the same case in the Netherlands as in many European countries, we've had for half a century, decades, aiming at stimulating sport participation, especially among people with lower education levels and lower income levels. All the efforts have gone into stimulating sport participation among those groups of people. And these are the results of those programs. There are no results. The gap between people doing sports, higher educated people doing sports and lower educated people doing sports, that gap is as big in 2013 as it was in 1963. It hasn't declined a bit. We still have difficulties reaching out to people with lower educations and lower income levels. And it's not just sports, okay? It is general healthy lifestyles. It's eating routines. It's drinking. It's smoking. It's going to the theater. It's reading books. This is a general phenomenon that in the lifestyles we have great difficulties in reaching out to those people. That is a major challenge. We had 50 years of policies, no success. The other one, and I already showed you that, is that the club sports in the Netherlands do face serious trouble. Okay? If you just look at the pictures, okay? Club sports over here, and these are all the sexy, new, glamorous kind of initiatives that do not come out of the club sector. Okay? These are all initiatives and concepts that are being developed in the commercial sector. Okay? But apparently the commercial sector is being much more capable of reaching out to new groups and coming up with new concepts, seducing people to be active in sports than do the club sector. It shouldn't come as a surprise, because if you interrogate sports clubs and ask them the question, do you want to grow? Do you want to gain new members? Do you want to reach out to new groups? Most sport clubs do not want to grow. They do not want to reach out to new members. They just want to have the same number of people and the same members. They are there for the current members, not for the new members. They don't gain much by reaching out to new groups. Okay? It wouldn't be surprised then that if you interrogate sports clubs, we can witness that about 87–90% of sport clubs experience troubles. They do not have enough volunteers. They have difficulty in keeping up the finances. They have difficulty in keeping up the membership. Because sports clubs in the Netherlands do have serious troubles in reaching out to new groups. This is a little bit of a difficult slide maybe, but if you look at the yellow bars is the sport participation in 1963. And the red bars is sport participation in 2013, so let's say 50 years later. In 1963, swimming was the biggest sport in the Netherlands. In 2013, there were less people swimming than in 1963. The second sport in 1963 was football. And even though we've had successes in football in the Netherlands, there are not more people playing football than in 1963. In 1963, football was the second sport in the country. It has been overtaken by fitness, it has been overtaken by running, and it has been overtaken by cycling. All of these three sports, fitness, running and cycling, are not club sports. People do that on their own, or people do that because they've been motivated by commercial initiatives. It's also the case that these three sports, running, cycling and fitness, have nothing to do with government involvement. The government invests in football clubs, in swimming pools, and they don't have to invest in running and in cycling or in fitness or in golf, which is another sport that has been growing rapidly. So all the growth that we've seen over the last couple of years has come not from policy from the government, but has been because of commercial initiatives and because of cultural changes in society. And club sports have a difficult time in facing up to those challenges. That was the second challenge. We do face, however, a third challenge in the Netherlands. And the third challenge has to do with physical activity skills. We monitored children in 2006, we monitored children in 1980, and we monitored them in 2006. And we tried to measure their motor skills. So we measured their strength, the stamina, what's the English word for being flexible? Like in gymnastics, you need to be really flexible. Well, we measured that, and we measured hand-eye coordination, so being able to throw, catch, or kick. Okay? And all of these measures, the kids in 2006 were doing worse than the kids from 1980. They had worse motor skills in 2006 than they had in 1980. So over time, we do see an increase in participation in sports, even among kids, okay? Even among kids between 12 and 19, which is a group that has a big dropout in sports. We do see increase in sport participation. But we do not see an increase in motor skills. Motor skills for children nowadays are worse than they were a generation before. And that's puzzling. That's even puzzling for me as a researcher. I don't really have the answer to that question. The assumption that I'm having is that it has to do with the fact that even though kids are doing sports, they're only doing sports once or twice or 3 times a week for like an hour. They go to the hockey club to play hockey and they go back home again. But what happened to playing outside? What happened to just being active around? I used to be very fond of football, okay? When we went to school, you brought along your shoes for football, and at 3 o'clock you went to the football pitch, you went to the park, you played football until 6, and then your parents called you in to eat, and then you went back to the football pitch again, you played football till dark, or after dark. That was my life. My kid is as fond of football as I am, and he does exactly the same thing as I do. When at 3 o'clock, he rushes home, and instead of going to the football pitch or to the park, he puts on his computer, and he plays FIFA 14, or 15 nowadays, okay? 16, good. That's how he is enthusiastic about football. He doesn't play football, he does play football, but he plays football online, sitting in his room, with internet, with central heating in his room, which is comfortable and cozy. And if he's not playing football, he'd be Twittering, Facebooking, social media, whatever kind of interactions that you now have nowadays online. He is sitting down. And I know I'm sounding like an old guy, I am an old guy, but when I was his age, there was no central heating, there was no television during daytime, there was no internet. The only thing you could do was go out and play with your friends. So that is a major change, and I think that major change is explaining why kids nowadays have worse physical activity skills than they had in 1980. Doing sports is good, but it's not enough, and we lost a great deal. So basically, I think we've got three major challenges. Even though, in fact, a lot of things are going well in the Netherlands. This is just another slide I wanted to show you. Because I'm assuming that, like me, you're all involved in sport research, in sport policies, in sport programs, in sport projects. And I kind of feel by myself sometimes, and I'm like I've got a prejudice that sport is important for a lot of people. And in fact, it's not. For most people, they may watch football on television, okay? But being active in sports is not a big thing for most people. If you look at the numbers of hours we spend on football and sports, this is statistics from the Netherlands, but it would be the same, I guess, for Denmark or many other European countries. We spend in the Netherlands 1.7 hours on sports in a week, while we have 40 hours of free time in a week. We spend 21 hours using the media, 7 hours on social interaction, and 5 hours on going to the bar and having drinks. Okay? We spend 1.7 hours on sports. And that is not just, the 1.7 hours not just the time that you'll be actively doing sports. It also involves going to the bar and having a drink. It involves changing clothes before and after the match. So if we only spend 1.7 hours on sports on a weekly basis, while we're having 40 hours of free time, and we're spending 20 hours behind the screen, or maybe reading something, can sport be that important to people then? It's not important to many people, I think. It may be a little, it's big if you look at the television, but it's not big in what you do with your life and with your free time. So, if this is the case, how then can we change that? I think there are 4 major challenges that we need to face if we want to change this. If we want people to become more physically active and use sports, especially sports, because sports brings the fun back into physically active. There are 4 major challenges. Unlike in the medicine or in the health sector, the budgets for sport are extremely limited. Just to cite you an example, in the Netherlands we've got a budget, a central government budget of 150 million euros. That is 1% of the total budget of the health department, of which sport is part of. So only 1% of the health department costs are being spent on sports. And it might not even have been that much of a trouble, that 1%, if that 1% had been calculated beforehand. You know, if you build a bridge, if you build a dam, we know how costly that dam or bridge is going to be. And it's going to be 2 million, 3 billion, 5 billion. If you build a railway system, we know how expensive that's going to be. If you want to have a cure for cancer, we have the experts, the medical experts coming in, have to calculate what kind of, they have to come up with a recipe, the recipe will cost money, and then we put that money into the health budget. That's not the way it goes with sports. In sports we don't calculate what it takes to make 80% of the people do sports, or 90% of the people do sports. We don't even know what it takes to make people do more sports. That's even a difficult question to answer right now. But if we don't know what it would take to make people do more sports, how can you allocate the budget to that? And I'd be guessing that the budget that you would actually need to increase sport participation fundamentally would be like 10 times or 20 times or 30 times the budget that we have currently available. The budget that we are given in the sports sector, and I'm guessing that it's pretty much the same in all of your countries, is like a political guess. A political, how do you call that? Well, we've got about, we should do something about sports because it's important. We've got about 100 million left. Okay, we're going to keep it like that. If you're in good economic circumstances, it will go a little bit. It might decline a little bit during the recession. If you're a very, very handy minister, very good minister, you may be able to increase the budget a little bit, but it will never be the sum that you actually need to increase sport participation. We don't have the tools yet to determine the budget that we need, so how can we ask for a bigger budget? I think I've covered now 1 and 2 and 3. This is the 4th one, okay? And I was pretty glad that I could show some examples of monitoring in which we could show that that program had some effect. But basically I think we need to be modest. We need to be modest about the possibilities that we have to influence healthy lifestyles, choices that people make, and sport participation through our policy program. And again, I want to remind you, the biggest increases in participation has come from running, from fitness, from cycling, from golf, and I think the fifth one was, how do you call that when you walk like that? Nordic walking. I mean, there's not a dime of government involvement in Nordic walking. All it took was a crazy guy that said, you take two sticks, you get more fun in walking. Okay? The influence that you have as a policy maker is actually quite limited. And much of the influence comes from peers, parents, culture, commercial sector, etc., etc. Just an example, I've been talking about the program on sportsmanship and respect, on a healthy sport climate, veilig sportklimaat. Beautiful program. I think it's about 40 million euros being invested in that program. But you can have a beautiful program. And then what happens? This is not kickboxing. This is actually soccer. This was the final in 2010, Netherlands to Spain. At the time that we still reached the finals, that we actually be part of the final program. This is what happens. And then you got the captain of the team, a certain Miss Idan Robben, stating, we didn't come to South Africa to win the Fair Play Cup. So imagine, as a young kid, and you're reading that message on the front page of the newspaper, and then on page 10 or 11, you're reading about the policy program, which is called Veilig Sportklimaat. You're gone as a policymaker. This is what influences young people, and not your policy program. And for that reason, I'm saying that the influence that you can execute over citizens to make choices in your life is fairly limited, in fact. So, I'm not saying that we can't do anything, okay? And I'm not saying that we don't have chances. This is the one thing I think that's an opportunity for most of us who are wanting to increase sport participation. Because even though only 2/3 of the Dutch people say they participate in sport, a higher percentage of Dutch people said they enjoyed sports at one point in their life. How can it be that 82% of Dutch people said at one point in life they enjoyed sports, and only 2/3 are actually participating? So we lost 17% of people that once had fun in sports, but stopped doing it. We should be able to get those people back. Okay? This is a starting point. You still got 18% of people that never enjoyed sports. That might be a difficult task, but this could be reached somehow. And this is my other graph, my optimistic graph. If you have sand in the dunes, if you have water, you don't need to push people to dive in or do something with the sand. Okay? You do need to stimulate them. They will just by themselves be physically active. People want to be physically active. You just need to give them the chance to be physically active and to not keep all the physical activity possibilities out of their regular lives. Okay? People want to be physically active. You just need to give them a chance to be physically active. So, how should we continue? I don't think there are any quick wins in raising sport participation levels. If you want people to be more physically active, to be part of sports, it's going to be a long-term project. It's not going to be finished in a couple of days. It's going to take 1 or 2 or 3 generations, I guess. It is going to involve the interplay of a lot of measures, a lot of stakeholders, and a lot of different programs. There is not just one solution, okay? You need to do a lot of things at the same time with a lot of different stakeholders. You need to involve all of them in order to reach some kind of success. On the long term, I think the answer is quite straightforward. You need to invest in physical education, like Richard Bailey just said in the session before this. You need to invest in high-quality physical education. And investing in high-quality physical education doesn't just mean that you count the number of hours that the kids are being physically active, because it's not the minutes that counts. It's about the motor skills they develop, and the self-confidence and the fun that they have learning that. Okay? That's what you need to invest in. You need to invest in parents, bringing that message across to the children, and helping the children develop those talents and develop that self-confidence. That is the long term. It's going to take 1 or 2 or 3 generations, I guess. In the meantime, what you do, I think, what you need to do is you have to bring sport as close to people as you can. Okay? You have to make it as easy for them to participate as you can possibly make it for them. That means you need to offer the activities that they want to do, and not just the activities that the sport clubs want to offer to them, That's different. No, it's not about the activities that the sports club wants to offer. It's about what the people want to do. That's a different thing. It needs to be close by. It needs to be easily accessible. There doesn't need to be a big price. It doesn't need to be a price anyway. So you need to bring sport as close to people as you can possibly get. And then finally, I think this is going to be a major challenge for policymakers and for researchers. And if policymakers and researchers don't get together to get this message across, I don't think we're ever going to make it. That's my message for today. Thank you.
Yes, we will take the questions afterwards for all three presentations. Yeah, my name is Henrik Brandt, and apart from having this play the game, we also have the Danish Institute for Sports Studies, as you probably discovered now, where we do research and try to also stimulate the debate in Denmark on sport policies. And the reason why I call this, you'll get to this later, if the power balance has changed. I just want to show you this picture. It's from London, Inspire a Generation. It doesn't look that inspiring, and it didn't work that well, but I'm not going to pick on London. We have other sessions for that, but on the mega events. But it's just it just shows how investment often goes when you want to also invest in participation. And if you go outside and look at the posters out there from the Foundation for Culture and Sports Facilities that are also co-sponsoring now of this part of the conference, you will see some of the projects. And if you go and see one of them, is the athletics experimentarium from Odense, from the University of Southern Denmark. I don't think the Athletics Federation will be entirely happy with the standards or the measures of that stadium if it was to host the Olympics, but it actually just won a gold medal today for innovative architecture. So go out and take a look at it after the session. Yes, Koen talked about this revolution, and this is the picture in Denmark, the silent revolution. You can say that sport has, through the years, it still is very big among. It's been considered for children and youth, and it has been for all the years where it has been measured. The lowest one is from 1964, and the upper one, which is almost horizontal, is from the last time we measured in 2011. And you can see there has been this positive picture in Denmark. We saw this morning that it's not that positive in all the other countries, but to round it up, you can say that there is not in our part of the world, it's not a real crisis in sports. People actually want to do sport, and they want to do it for the whole life. Maybe some of the established actors in sport that has traditionally been supplying the sport that have some problems, because, as also Koen was saying, they don't really win they don't win market shares. So that's also, so people, they want to take part, but it's not sports. So the question is, who is delivering, and how can you also integrate that into sport policies? And if you have been to the conference before, and maybe also some other conferences, I think it was in 2011, we had Jerome Scherder from Leuven introducing this from the Measure Network. This the pyramid that Richard Bailey also showed it earlier this morning. That is the way the sport has traditionally been portrayed, and it's something. It's a one big system that is the Olympic model, and it works maybe for children at some specific age. It gets them into sport, but but the large majority they are not there. They are more like fitting into the church model, where you can say that there is the church tower is where there is a link between the grassroots. They might eventually turn up at a good level and become elite athletes, but for the large majority of people that come into sport and has created this picture that we saw before, to reach them, you have to there are other suppliers who can make people active, and you can say the clubs and federations that are traditionally in the center of sport policies, they're just one part of that picture. And if you look at the Eurobarometer figures, you can also see that the pyramid, okay, it's important for people in Europe who practice in a sports club, maybe also sometimes in a sports center. But if you look at the church, there are many more environments to do sport in where that are relevant for the church, if you put it like that. And that is also where the big mass is to be found, as it looks today. And if we look at some figures I have from Maya, in the room? Yes, there, from the sports participation survey, where she's been looking at what has been happening in Denmark, you can see that it's been, if you look at the horizontal ones in the bottom, that is the solo sports in the club, and also what she calls the duo sports in the club. They are relatively stable. What has really been growing is the solo sports in the non-club, and again, and also you can see the one with the 24% is solo sports in clubs. So they have had some success, but they are not winning new customers there. So that is what the pictures look like. So it becomes clear that in spite of all the attention and the resources that has been dedicated to this area through the last 2-3 decades, organized sport has not been a big part of the growth. That doesn't mean that they're not important. We also, coming back to the Twitter hit we had yesterday, they still take the attention of the press, particularly, and of thereby also the politicians, because they have the fascinating events and the power that goes with that. And that also makes it a little bit difficult to argue sometimes for new approaches. And that's why I'll put this one in, because maybe we had this talk about good governance, that in elite sport, that if the governing bodies are not doing their job properly, they might become irrelevant. There might be pirate leagues or like we have in some sports that are just bypassing them, that there are coming players' unions and all kinds of stakeholders are going in. But this is maybe, in fact, one of the real scandals. And this is a scandal, as I said, the journalists don't pay attention to this scandal. The scandal is maybe that you can see that many, because of maybe that the governance is not as it should be, they are not so good to attach to new sports. They don't really care. They're not. So if they don't have a good governance structure, they are not, and they don't involve all the stakeholders, they might not be able to react to it. They might still have it in the values like Olympism and things like that, but they are not really doing anything for the big masses doing sport, and they're not becoming part of the growth. And the other part of the coin is that governments are not really they are not really drawing the consequences of it. They still invest in the structures, and they know the traditional sports facilities. It's not also on the local level, and also the clubs and the federations, and we can see they are stable. They're not going up. So I'm not saying they are wasting the money or they're doing a bad job necessarily, but they don't invest in many other ways. And that is maybe where the need for another approach sometimes come in, and we see it very, very clearly sometimes in some countries where there's a review done. It shows this picture, and then they throw more money after the system they already have. They don't think of new ways to invest. So for example, I think we see it a lot in our neighboring countries. We also see it in Denmark, where they think they can push the governing bodies to do something else, and they try, but it doesn't really work. That is the problem. And in England, we just heard about UK, the consultation they launched on the policy, and there they really try to involve all kinds of other stakeholders. But will it end with all kinds of other stakeholders being part of the policies and the financing? We don't know. So, but in spite of this, the revolution is happening. What happened to me? This is something I stole from the exponential organization. I think it's called what is growing outside of our movement is, for example, the Uber. They don't have a taxi. They just have the app, the system. They review the customers and people. They facilitate that people buy it. Or you could take Facebook. They have all the content, but they don't have journalists. Or another one that is familiar to most, Airbnb. They don't have any hotel rooms, but they are the biggest supplier of hotels, and it has come within very, very few years. And I think, because from the research we do now, we are seeing the same pattern now in the sports. It's finally, maybe it's always been there, but it's really beginning to take pace now. So if you look at those people up there, that is the FIFA executive. It's not from James Bond, it's from there. It's a FIFA executive. But they might be able to stay in power. We don't know how this election and how this structure will ever. But if they, maybe it will not mean a lot, because football will be played in many other ways, no matter who's sitting there. We don't know. We will see that. And I'll give some examples of what we see right now. And the research, some of it is done by Martin. Where are you, Martin? Are you here? There, he's doing lots of research on innovative entrepreneurs into sport. And we just started up. It's just so exciting to speak to these innovative social entrepreneurs that we see coming up all the time. This is an example. You may be familiar with it. In the Mondo, you have it on your mobile phone. There are other apps. We talked to them in 2009, I think, for the first time when they started to make a kind of network through the mobile where you can measure how far you run and you can connect and you can share. They were sold this year. We were sitting in the same office like they were in Copenhagen. They were also tenants there. They were sold for 550 million kroner to Under Armour, and they had 25 million users. They had all the data on cyclists and runners that the governing bodies do not have. They knew how fast, who they were, which age, with whom. They knew which routes they took, and they could start maybe selling heat maps to municipalities so they could plan how to make the parks and things like that. And they do that. That's another. It is not a success story. This is just some examples of companies coming up trying to introduce. It might not work for them all. They might die, some of them. That's the way it goes with commercial entrepreneurs. But the mindset, I'm sure, is there to stay. For the facilities, one sport, you just go in, you put all the local pitches, for example in tennis, up there, and you can just see is it free, and we can book it, and we can go in there. We don't have such a system in this country, but it has been, the association has the time slots, and if they don't do anything, it's been empty. But now there is a kind of interlink. If it's empty, public can book it and pay, and they can also, the next thing will of course be they can hook up with their friends. Another example, look at that body. It looks quite good, doesn't it? It is actually a national governing body. It looks like that, a national governing body. It's called Christian Nielsen. He is 18 years old. He started doing calisthenics, and he showed it on the video how he trained. 16 million downloads on YouTube within his story. He is quite entrepreneurial. He said, I can sell courses. Come and train with me and my friends. And he's giving instructors courses. And now he's just launched his online shop. You can buy various products there. He has, I don't remember, I think 65,000 followers. He's bypassed all this. He doesn't need a federation or a governing body. He is a governing body. And that is a new company coming up called Athlete.com, Danish entrepreneurs. They do, that's where I saw him, because they simply say, I'm a good coach, maybe I'm an elite athlete, I provide, you can book me. You can even book the Wimbledon winner we had in men's duel, 2,000 kroner an hour, and you can play tennis with him. And he's whenever you want, and you can rate him afterwards, like Uber. Was he good? If he was bad, then he won't have any customers anymore. And he can rate the customers. Did they show up? And it's all kinds of they just provide a platform where you can offer your service, and you are an expert, and your customers are rating you. So if you have your kids, you would like them to swim, you can just book an instructor there and pay, and that's maybe what you want. And they are not just thinking Denmark, they're thinking many countries, because they know that this is not the easiest environment, because our club structure is relatively well developed. And in many countries, this will be a new way to The instructors can sell their service. That will be a profession. That will be a profession. They can be on 20 platforms. They don't have only to be on this one. But that's a way to go directly, actually bypass the governing body. And that is team sport. Hot sport means team sport. They do various services for teams, how to easily get together your players and manage your team. If you are a team manager, I have, for example, a team of under 14s. So you can use that to communicate with the mothers and fathers and book it. It's not part of the FA system. They said, when they had 30,000 euros in 2010, they said, should we cooperate on this with the FA? They said, we prefer to make our own system. But in spite of that, they now have 2,000 and 19,000 users. They maybe have, is it half the football players in this system? They just created it too. So it's not just individual sports that's now coming into this new world. It's also team sports. And the other one there is an example from England, the Gold Soccer Centres, where you can buy a pitch, you can find a player, you can rate yourself, you can seek a team if you move to a new town. They try to do everything to keep the teams playing, no matter how bad they are. If they are bad, it's better, because then they can give them a service and they're willing to pay, and they do not fit into the organized sport. But I just looked into the annual report. It's not that everything is perfect there, but look what they're doing. FIFA has been discussing this for years. That's a part of the annual report. Our new goals cam technology it's coming now, so you can see your own clips. Imagine how that's going to explode. Look at my goal on your Facebook and all that. Brilliant idea. And that's, of course, that's just to make a good product to the customers. I'm sure it will attract people to play. And also, we're now going into the core of what sports governing bodies are doing. Many of these people, obviously, they come out of organized sport. That is a new environment. You can go into technique, you can become a member, you can get all kinds of advice of how to coach, new practical, things you can train and the way you can do it. Or you can also book, of course, somebody to come and inspire you. You don't just book them in the local football association. If you I'm sick and tired of their instructors and all this, they come, you can book, this is what we need. We need one to come and tell us how to train our goalkeepers. So you just bypass all that they have to tell you about all kinds of values and things like that. We want this because that's what fits our need. And I'm not saying it's a supplement, but it's something that we just see growing now. It's not just the good-looking governing bodies, it's also the elderly. That guy, he's also from England, is another example. He came home in 2011, found his grandmother in the care home, and so he was sitting, he was not practicing, started doing that. Hey, I can train with the staff of this care home, and we can document what we are doing. And now he has 600 care homes with contracts, and they train and they document what they do and how it works. It grows so rapid. And why didn't organized sport, why didn't they take it? Because they didn't care. And the last one is we have the Company Sports Federation this afternoon. That is company sport done without any funding from the lottery. It is just, we have the instructors, you can get the personal advice, we can take the companies in, cycling, running, we can document what we're doing, and they can make it commercially viable in spite of sports federations being paid, you can say, to do this. But they are doing it in a way that companies think is sometimes, of course. I'm not saying again that the others are doing a bad job. I'm just saying it's going so rapid that new people are coming in and saying, we can do it. And we do it we do it exactly how people want it out there. The last one, what about the events? That is, of course, the core of the sports governing bodies. For example, here, Athletics Federation, they want to certify the races. They haven't been doing anything in running for many years, but now they try. But they are going to be bypassed. The thing they hope they can make all the race organizers be certified in their system. But in fact, that app is already there. Why don't you let the users rate, like TripAdvisor, the races, and that's a kind of user-driven certification of the good events. And of course they can start to share the events, and that's a business model they have there. And Koen showed the other one. Golazzo is an example of an event organizing company from Belgium. They develop all kinds of new events, trail running, mud running, marathons, and they own the data and they use it. And they provide the full package, so they can provide. They have a huge community that many of the organized sports federations they don't have. So it's going very, very rapidly. So to come to my conclusions, that there is a need of reform. The organized sports governing bodies, they are not pressured by media and this one, and maybe they don't really have a big heart for this. They don't have the real commitment to do anything. And maybe they are not good enough at engaging with somebody that are not their members. Why don't they engage with social entrepreneurs, for example? Because they feel they are a threat to their club, but why? We see new organizations coming up that don't get a lot of money. They don't have a problem if the local surf shop in the western coast can provide better training courses. Why can't they become a member? And we don't have, again, we know this, it's not, the use on the women, they are not there. That also means they are blind to their needs. It's obvious. It's from a commercial point of view, it's not a good idea to keep them up, or from a membership point of view. And they also, they look to the politicians, they look at all of the good things we can do, while the more commercial or business savvy, or what we can call them, also social entrepreneurs, they look, of course, to the needs of the customers. So they don't really have they don't really have sometimes the tools, and this has very much to do with if it's like the FIFA executive boardroom. You cannot imagine, for example, grassroots football having play a big role there. It's just not going to happen. Even though they maybe have a department, they will never be able to compete with the entrepreneurs. So the question there is, and that creates the perfect environment for all these new trending companies with the digital systems they have now to just go in and take that share. I think we will see an example this afternoon as well. So my question there is, maybe if we cannot reform them or we cannot revolutionize the governing bodies, maybe we won't even care because we don't need them. That is the question I will end up with. And then I will hand over to Johan, who is actually trying on behalf of the Swedish government to evaluate the sports governing body and what they are doing, and can that lead to change? That's up to you, Johan, to answer that question. Thank you.
I will actually use a headset because I tend to disappear if I stand behind those things. Well, thank you, Henrik, and thank you for interesting presentations. My name is Johan Norberg. I'm associate professor at Malmö University in Sweden, but I'm also a researcher at the Swedish National Center for Research in Sports. And I'm here today to talk about our Swedish system for monitoring government support to sports. And based on that, I will also address the issue whether the sports governing bodies in Sweden or the sports movement in Sweden is up for the task of delivering sport to society. That question is a bit rhetorical, of course, and I will come back to that. But let me first say that it has been very interesting to listen to both Koen and Henrik, but it's a bit annoying as well because a lot of my experiences are a bit the same. I will repeat some of their interesting analyses, but I see very much similarities between the Mulier Institute and what we are doing in Sweden. Okay. So first, a few words about the Swedish National Center for Research in Sport, or SIF as we say in Sweden. This is a state-funded scientific board with the task to initiate, to coordinate and to promote research on sport. But since 2009, SIF also has the responsibility for annually evaluations of government support to sports. In other words, we try to help the government to assess whether the societal value of the government support to the sports movement. And we do this above all in two ways. First of all, we collect a lot of data in a huge variety of aspects concerning Swedish sports. For instance, we collect information about the size of different sports, members, gender, age, and so. We collect data about activity levels within youth sport. Of course, we gather information about public health, physical activity. We also study economics. We study revenues from sponsors, but also the different federations' dependency of public funding, for instance. Anti-doping activities, and also elite sport achievements. And all those data, we summarize our findings in a report that we publish in May each year. Unfortunately, this report only exists in Swedish at the moment, but I hope that already next year we will have at least part of our report in English, and we also present the information at our website, of course. If this is the quantitative part of our monitoring system, then we also have a qualitative part, and that is so-called in-depth studies in different areas concerning sports. And the most important thing here is that it is the government that decide what issues we are about to study. So in December each year we are very nervous and excited, because then we get a new assignment and we don't know beforehand what the questions are that we are to look into. The first year we did this in 2010, we were to analyze whether the youth sport in Sweden meet the requirements of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So that was typical youth sport investigation. The next year we were to study elite sports and whether the government support to elite sports have any impact on our achievements. We have had studies about integration, we have studies about disabilities. We have, 2 years ago we had what we might call good governance perspective. We studied ethics in sports with regard to economy and with regards to management and law. This year we focus on democracy, and above all we study if the members of local sport clubs actually are part of the democratic procedures within the sports clubs, if they attend the annual meetings, if they sit on boards and so. I don't have time, unfortunately, to discuss the findings of all these reports, but I would like to stress that our monitoring system has been positive in several ways. First of all, this has been a huge help for us in Sweden to gather information about the size of the Swedish sports movement and about the sport movement's condition of existence. And I agree to many of the findings that we saw earlier today, and I will come back to some of those. But I would also like to stress that the monitoring system have had an impact on government sport policy. And not least our in-depth studies have been important in that way that this had become a way for the government to say, these are the questions that we are interested in right now. These are the questions we want to address, we want to know more, and these are the ones that we will discuss together with the sports movement and so on. So I will really underline the overall theme of this session. I think there is a huge impact. I think there is a power in data analysis and in monitoring systems. Okay. With this background, when I was invited to this session, the question was raised whether, after 5 years of monitoring government-supported sports, what is my opinion? Do I find that the sports movement in Sweden, is it up to the task to deliver sport to society? And I will try to comment on that, and I would say, well, both yes and no, actually. And I was start with showing 2 slides showing a more broader picture of Swedish sport and also of sports in the Scandinavian countries or in the Nordic countries. The thing is, in international comparisons, Sweden and its neighboring Nordic countries often stand out both with regard to the structure of the welfare society and the system, and with regards to health and to sport and to physical activity, and I would like to show that with 2 slides. This one is a few years old. I took it from Mike Collins in an article I read a couple of years ago, but I think if I could have used similar using, for instance, the World Values Study, or there are big studies comparing different countries, and they usually give the same picture. Here we have two dimensions. We have an index of health and social problem, and we have an index of income inequalities. And the picture that emerges tend to be something like this. Japan stands out, and the Nordic countries stands out, being countries which are characterized with low income inequalities and low levels of social problems. And on the other hand, we often see the United States. Researchers, when they try to analyze this, often emphasize the different welfare models in these countries. That is, we have a more liberal, market-oriented model in the United States, while the Nordic countries have a more state-oriented, more social democratic welfare regime. So this is a factor I think we must take into account. But the interesting thing is that when we look at physical activity and sport, we get the same picture. We have seen it today several times in the so-called Eurobarometer, and I won't talk much about it, but the question was raised by Richard Bailey earlier. Here we see the answer to the question, how often do you exercise or play sport? And we see big differences between countries in Europe. Sweden is an extreme example in that way that less than 10% claim that they never do exercise or play sport. But the other Nordic countries are close to that. And then we have in the southern part of Europe, we have these countries in red where a majority of the inhabitants say that they never do exercise or play sport. So from that perspective, there seems that the Nordic countries are at least doing something right when it comes to provide sport to society. And the main reasons, I would say there are two main reasons for this. And the first one is, of course, the strong traditions in these countries of sport as a popular movement, of voluntary clubs gathered in federations, gathered in larger confederations and so. For instance, in Sweden, 2.8 million people are members of at least one sport club. That is, 1 out of 3 in Sweden say that they're members of a sport club. Among young people, the numbers are much higher. Almost all young people have experienced at least membership in one club before the age of 20, more than 80% at least. And most of them have experienced many clubs and a variety of sports. That is, of course, one important part in this. And the other part that I also must mention is the extensive public support to sports in all Nordic countries. I would dare to say that maybe our public support is the largest in maybe Europe, and we have studies that point in that direction. It's not only big, extensive support; it's also a support based on the principle of welfare policy. The aim of the public support is above all to support youth sport, to provide sports for all, and not elite sport achievements. So from that perspective, I would say that these figures can be used to claim that the sports governing bodies in Sweden or in the Nordic countries are up to the task to deliver sport to society. At least if you compare to other countries in Europe and so. But however, our monitoring system that we have had since 2010 can be used to give a more complex picture. And here I will give 3 examples, all based on youth sport, but they all have been discussed more or less earlier in the presentations today. And the first example is that we actually have seen in Sweden that the level of activity in youth sports are declining. This decline started about 2008. I don't know why it started in 2008, but somebody told me that in Sweden we got the iPhone in 2008, and maybe that's part of the problem. And I haven't, we can see that the decline has continued since 2012. So this is nothing that we don't right now see that this is a temporary decline. Rather, it seems that after almost 100 years of continuous growth within the Swedish sports movement, we are actually seeing that it's going down. If we look into these figures, we also see that the decline is more prominent among girls than among boys, and we also see that it starts about the age of 13, 14, and then so it's the younger, the older, it is the teenagers that tend to lead to more in a quicker pace than before. Another example of development or trends which we have found in our monitoring system is that there are big differences in the level of activities in youth sport in different municipalities in Sweden. To put it short, we have high levels of high level of activities in middle class and upper class suburban municipalities close to the major cities. We have lesser levels of activity in, for instance, rural areas. We have lesser activities in municipalities with social problems. So what we have is indications that the opportunity for young kids to attend sport activities are not equally divided, and that the social background, the economy tend to matter in these cases. A third example, maybe showing the same thing, is that we have seen in recent club sports a tendency of higher costs, and these higher costs seem to be the result of a broader commercialization and professionalization process within club sports. And interestingly enough, both leaders in clubs and parents to sporting kids seem to embrace and be positive to this development. They seem to want a more business-like, more professionalized activity with less degree of voluntary work and so. But a consequence, of course, is that if you want more paid staff and so, it will tend to raise the costs, it will raise the fees, and while some of the families are willing to pay for this, there will be other families and other kids that can't afford to be part of this development. So once again, we see that economy tend to matters when it comes to participation in sports. I would like to end my presentation with a fourth example, which is not derived from our monitoring system. I got it from a study which the Swedish Sports Confederation made. It's a study concerning the trends among young kids in Sweden nowadays. And the question in this study was not how often do you exercise, it was rather how do you exercise. And we got this picture. We get 3 lines here. The yellow line is young kids saying that they exercise and work out on their own. For instance, walking, running. The blue line is those who claim that they go to different privately owned fitness centers, gyms, and places like that. And finally, the purple line is exercise within club sports. I would say that 2 things are important here. First of all, we see that while the yellow and the blue line tend to go upwards, we see that the purple line tend to go downwards. There seems to be some kind of transition among young people that they leave club sports and exercise in other forms. This is not new to us. We have seen this for many years. But a more troublesome finding here is that already at the age of 15, 16, there seems to be that club sports is actually an activity that they claim that they least use when they work out and when they exercise. And this is definitely this is news for me, and we have very little information about youth sport outside of the sports movement in Sweden. But if this is accurate, then we have a real challenge here, because then one cannot say that the sports movement can provide sports to the Swedish society. Well, there at least is limitations of the sports movement's capacity to provide sport to Swedish society. Of course, the sports movement is still a very important part providing sports, but as I say, current trends, there seem to be hard for the sports movement to reach all groups in society. There seem to be a lot of sporting activities outside of the sport movement, and our monitoring system have been a way to highlight these questions. It has been a way to put it on the sport policy agenda. I won't take time to discuss what we can do, how we further on, maybe in the discussion, but I would say that our monitoring system has been a good way of bringing those questions to the sport policy agenda in Sweden. So, thank you.
Thank you, Johan. We will only take 5 or 10 minutes of question. We know that lunch is waiting. Can you hear me? Is it working? Yeah.
Now it is.
It is working? Yes.
Now it's working. And
yeah, I'll stay here because that's easier. So I think we'll just go straight to the point. So the idea is that in the afternoon we have a private company talking about their way, how they work with data and analysis in cooperation often with governing bodies. And then we will have the Danish Sports Confederation, the National Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee. I think that's how it's called in English. The Flemish Sports Federation will not make it, and that is they have actually some problem with the governing wanting to reduce funding for some federations. So maybe some of these things are actually happening also to go into policies. And then we'll have the European company sports federations, and we will have some new platforms coming up with street sport in the afternoon. But now, any questions? Then we'll take them. And please state who you are and where you come from.
Sven O'Keefe, the Sports Markets Network. All you three guys talk about clubs and the commercial sector. In the middle, I think there's a massive growing, could be like social enterprise sector. The community groups, all those weird and wacky people who are doing things, somehow they make a living, but they often break all the rules, etc. How do they fit into all this? I bet you a lot of money if any of those guys went to see any governing body saying, I can do a better job than you can, on outside the system, the governing body would say, go away, please. How does the system cope with those people? Because they have to.
I think you're perfectly right. It was never my intention to say that there are only two systems, the club system and the commercial system. I think you're perfectly right. There's a large increase in people that somehow bond with each other, organize things, set up activities, and while they're not being a formal club. Okay, and this is going to be one of the big increases. And the whole social media platforms that are developing are helping these people to a great deal to self-organize themselves without being members of federations or without needing funds from governments. And that is going to be a big increase in the next couple of years. So you're going to get a system in which you have a traditional club system, which usually draws most of the government money, national government and local government's money. You'll have a commercial system with fitness centers that takes up a lot of consumers without any government being spent on that. And then you have this small light community kind of, I think it's called Sport Light by some of the scientists here in the room, that is not being formalized, it is happening, it is not commercial, and it's really becoming big. And you should just welcome that as a government, that is happening. And I'm not really sure how you can stimulate it or facilitate it, but this is going to be a big third party, if you may call it party, in sports development, yeah. My point is that if I look at the national government, and if I look at cities, they will usually turn to clubs to help them stimulate sport participation. And I understand why that is the case, but if you're a government, you should look outside clubs as well, to the commercial sector and to those local initiatives that you are describing right now. Koen?
Yeah. May I?
You have to respond.
I would like to add that sport policy in Sweden is a very conservative area for 100 years. The government has supported club sports, and the market has always been seen as some kind of bad guy. And the trend right now actually is to, just like you said, focus on how can we help club sports to face these challenges. But I still think it will be a bit provocative from a Swedish perspective to support things outside the sports movement. In a few years, maybe this picture will change, but still, this is a very conservative area.
Isn't that then in fact a very weak aspect of Swedish sport policy? That there's so much emphasis in such a monopoly position of federations and clubs?
Well, I think maybe this is the other side of a tradition that was very successful and that we're very proud of. And we need the kind of discussion that we have today. And we need to talk, not only we here, we need to, on a more broader level, in order to make that possible to change.
I can add that we will have in the afternoon an example of social entrepreneurs, because I didn't really distinguish between if they were commercial or non-commercial, or if they could also be from the voluntary, from club sector and not part of the official system, or they could be from the official system. I'm not making a distinction. It is just that this entrepreneurial way is expressing itself in new ways, and it's aided by new technologies, and it's going very, very rapidly. And we actually have an example in the afternoon when this national platform for street sport is showing how they have emerged and how they work. We have a question here.
Hello, my name is Mattias Jernberg, coming from the Swedish Sports Confederation, and I have a question about the new research from Sweden, that they have interviewed teenagers, and the teenagers says that doing sports in a sports club is not a part of being their image of being an adult. Doing sports in a sports club is a part of being a child, a part of the childhood. And that was, to me, it was a new discussion. Could you reflect on that? So, sports clubs are not interesting when it's not a part of growing up or becoming an adult.
I think it makes perfect sense. I mean, if you reach puberty, okay, you want to make your own choices, and you want to not do the things that your parents have led you for doing things for years. So it's perfectly reasonable. People at that age look for new opportunities and new venues and new choices away from the things that the parents and the school has taught them that is important. So it makes perfect sense. I don't even think there's any harm in that. Okay, I think. And Richard Bailey touched upon that in the session earlier. We need to provide kids with a solid base before they're like 12 or 13. And if they've had good experiences with sports, if they become self-confident, skillful, at that time, they may drop out a little bit during puberty. But they will come back. They will come back either to sports in general or to sports clubs. They will come back. The main question is, are sport clubs capable of getting those people back again into the system? And I don't think they are.
I can add that maybe it's also your own, it's actually you ask for it in some ways, because we should not blame the organized sport for being very good at children. Let's start remembering that. But when you had these problems, for example, Sweden, when new trends coming up and the adults wanting to do sport, you have always said that sport is a children and youth movement. So you always said it yourself. So maybe it's not so surprising that the clubs are not thinking in other ways.
If I can just add one thing. It used to be that you could join a sports club when you're like 9 or 8, or 10, 9, 8 years old. Nowadays you join a sports club at 4. Is it a surprise that you get bored after 10 years? Look at something different?
Yeah, thank you for some very interesting presentations. I'm Paul Broberg, Public Relations Director in the NOC of Denmark, and it's good to be challenged. First of all, there is a movement going on saying that sports organizations tend to say, okay, we might have a wide interest, and saying that sports participation is also an interest for us, because that is even improving our recruitment base. That's one part that's just a comment. But the other thing is that, of course, when we look at statistics, we tend to forget values. And here we are for the governments. We can't understand why the governments are still heavily supporting the organized sports. But aren't we forgetting that they might want to say that they want something with the society? And there are values based on this. They want the structure of clubs to say that this is where people do have the opportunity to take responsibility for others, to have voluntary work, to show interest in the community, and part of that, because, I mean, some of this discussion could tend that everyone doing a Facebook group on a political issue should have party support instead of the traditional political parties. Yeah.
Well, I think you're right about that. But I think a development in which local clubs tend to be more business-minded and be more like companies, then they also tend to look at their members like clients and customers and so. So then the values are maybe challenged, the traditional values. So just saying that a trend in which local clubs become more like market-oriented, then the values will tend to discuss.
If I may add, I think you're fully right. Okay, there is a big difference between paying to be a member of a fitness center and shaping your own sports facilities when you join a sports club and become a volunteer and maybe govern the sports club itself. The social capital that comes out of being a member of a sports club is much different from the social capital that comes out of joining a fitness center. If you join a fitness center, you will go there with your friends that you've already known for years. If you go to the sports club, you will meet new people, you will have a role in the society, you learn things and skills as a volunteer, and you will generally have more bridging capital. You reach out to new groups. So I would never, ever say that we should not invest in sport clubs, especially for this reason. What I am saying is that if you want to increase sport participation, you should not only look at sports clubs. Because the fitness centers, and maybe also the informal kind of activities that you've been describing, seem to put more results in seducing people to do sports. So from increasing sport participation, you should look more than just sport clubs. Still, sport clubs are important for a reason that I just mentioned. Yes.
We have one more down there, and then we'll have to close, I think, unless there is one who is really, but we have one question down there.
Thank you. My name is Anis, and I work for a tech company, actually. I followed my wife. She's one of the guest speakers here, so I actually plan to spend more time by the beach, but the conference is quite interesting, and I spend more time inside than outside. But anyways, to my question, I mean, working for a tech company, usually when you see a huge entity that has a monopoly, you usually come with the approach of like disturbing the market. They say, what does the client really need? Are they happy with what they're getting? And then eventually you just follow from the bottom up, and eventually you topple. I mean, it ends up as a David and Goliath most of the time. That's the scenario that you end up coming. But coming here and then hearing basically how FIFA behaves, or all of those international organizations that are basically supposed to nurture sports and develop it and make it accessible to everybody. I have a hard time, I would like to basically have your point of view of how do you think this eventual battle will happen when you have all of those social media entrepreneurs coming up, and eventually they will grow to a pace where they would organize soccer games from different villages, different cities, and eventually different towns. How do you see that ending? Obviously, this is all speculation, but I'm interested to hear your point of view on that.
I don't know if I see that ending somewhere. I see that beginning to take off very, very fast. And it's interesting that you say you're not involved in the sports sector, but your opinion is actually exactly the voice that is needed, and that's the one that doesn't really find a home in the organized sports. So they should start talking to people like you actually, instead of only the same old cronies that they used to talk to.
I agree with Henrik. I can only see this trend further developing. I can only see this